After a night out, I found my husband in our bed with my neighbor. She whispered, "I thought you'd never find out." He laughed, "She'll forgive me." I quietly replied, "Forgiveness isn't in my plans. But revenge is." The next day, they realized I had sold the house and disappeared. He yelled, "Where did she go?" No one knew. I never thought my life would turn into a cliché cheating story, the kind you read online and think, "Wow, that's messed up," but that would never happen to me. But life has a way of proving you wrong in the worst ways. Mark and I had been together for 12 years. Married for 8. We had a nice life in Austin, Texas, nothing extravagant, but comfortable. We had a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood where people waved when they walked their dogs. Where neighbors borrowed sugar and returned the favor with fresh-baked cookies. Where people smiled at you like they actually meant it. It was the kind of place where you thought you knew your neighbors. I found out the hard way that I didn't. That Friday night, I had no idea my world was about to implode. It started with something normal. My best friend Lisa had been bugging me all week to go out for drinks. I wasn't really in the mood, but she wouldn't let it go. "Come on, just one drink. You never go out anymore." She wasn't wrong. Mark didn't like when I went out. Not that he was controlling, exactly, but he always found a way to make me feel guilty about it. "I just miss you when you're gone," he'd say. Or, "It's been a long week. I thought we'd spend time together." But that night, he told me he was working late. I wouldn't have seen him anyway. So I went. Lisa and I ended up at a bar downtown. Nothing crazy. Just two women in their mid-30s catching up, laughing over overpriced cocktails, and pretending we weren't tired by 10 p.m. Around midnight, I called it. I wasn't drunk, just buzzed enough to feel warm. I hugged Lisa, grabbed an Uber, and headed home. I remember feeling happy on the drive back. That light, content kind of happy you get when you've had a good night. I was even thinking about waking Mark up when I got home, maybe surprising him, maybe making up for lost time. Then I pulled into the driveway, and that feeling vanished. Something felt off. The first thing I noticed was the porch light. It was off. Mark always left it on for me. Always. The second thing was our bedroom window. It was open. We never left it open. A weird feeling settled in my stomach. The kind of quiet dread you don't want to acknowledge, because if you do, it means something is really wrong. I walked inside, locking the door behind me out of habit. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. I kicked off my heels, set my purse down, and took a step toward the hallway. That's when I heard it. A soft laugh. A woman's laugh. I froze. It came from our bedroom. For a second, I stood there, my brain struggling to catch up with reality. Like maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe, then I heard his voice. A low murmur. Another laugh. My hands were shaking before I even realized I was moving. I stepped forward, the hardwood cold under my bare feet, my breath shallow and too loud in my ears. The door was cracked open. Just enough. I reached out and pushed it. And there they were. Mark. In our bed. With Jessica. Our neighbor. I don't know how long I stood there. 5 seconds. 10. She was smirking. She wasn't even surprised. She just stretched out, like a cat in a sunbeam, and said, "I thought you'd never find out." Mark sat up, rubbing his face like I was just some mild inconvenience. Then he laughed. Laughed. "She'll forgive me," he said, so casually. So damn confidently. Like this was just a minor mistake. Like I was some naive, stupid little woman who would cry for a bit, but ultimately stay. Like I had before. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not sadness. Not anger. Something sharper. More final. I took a slow breath. When I spoke, my voice was calm. Too calm. Forgiveness isn't in my plans. I met Jessica's gaze. Held it. She was still smiling, but it had faltered at the edges. Then I looked at Mark. But revenge is. And then I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't even cry. I just sat in the darkened living room for a moment, my mind working faster than it ever had. Then I got to work. Because Mark had made a mistake. A huge mistake. See, he was smart. But I was smarter. And he had no idea what was coming. I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at nothing, listening to the faint sound of laughter from the bedroom. It wasn't loud, but I could hear it. Jessica's voice. Mark's low chuckle. Like I was already gone. Like I didn't matter. Something in me went ice cold. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they won. That was about to change. I went into the office, closed the door, and turned on my laptop. My fingers moved without hesitation. I already knew what I had to do. Mark and I owned the house together. But the deed? The mortgage? Every single important document? In my name. Mark had terrible credit. He always brushed it off. It's fine, babe, you have the better score. It just makes sense to put everything under you. And like a fool, I agreed. Until now. I opened my email and searched for an old message from a real estate agent. She had contacted me a few months ago, saying there was a buyer interested in our house. I had ignored it back then. Now, I hit reply. House is available. No negotiations. 24-hour cash close. Call me. Within 10 minutes, I had a response. Within 2 hours, I had a deal. By morning, I would no longer own this house. By tonight, Mark would no longer have a place to sleep. I barely slept. I didn't need to. I was running on something sharper than caffeine, something that kept my mind crystal clear. At 7 a.m., I took a long, hot shower. Washed every trace of him off me. At 8 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, calm as could be. At 9 a.m., Mark stumbled in, looking like he had barely slept. He was in boxers, his hair a mess. He didn't even look at me. Like I wasn't there. Like he wasn't in our kitchen, after screwing our neighbor, drinking coffee like it was just another day. I sipped mine and stared at him. I wanted him to feel my gaze. I wanted him to sense something was wrong. He didn't. He was too comfortable. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to ruin him. The sale went through before noon. The buyer wired the funds. The paperwork was done. The house was no longer mine. And Mark had no idea. At 2 p.m., I packed what I needed. My important papers. My laptop. My clothes. I wasn't taking everything. Just what mattered. At 4 p.m., the moving truck arrived. At 5 p.m., I called a locksmith. Mark had gone out by then, probably to the gym, maybe to Jessica's, who knew? By the time he got back, he wouldn't be able to get inside. I was gone by 6 p.m. Not just gone. Vanished. But I wasn't done yet. Because there was one more thing I had to do. Something that would really make him pay. At 8 p.m., I pulled into the parking lot of a small coffee shop, opened my laptop, and got to work. See, Mark thought he had secrets. But I had more. And he had no idea how much I knew. Because Mark had been screwing more than just Jessica. And it was time the whole world found out. I sat in the coffee shop, fingers hovering over my keyboard, heart pounding, but not with fear. With anticipation. Mark thought I was a fool. He thought I was weak. He thought he could humiliate me, laugh in my face, and get away with it. He had no idea what was coming. I logged into his email. It was insultingly easy. Mark used the same password for everything. His email, his social media, his bank accounts. He thought he was clever by adding an exclamation mark at the end, like that made it foolproof. I typed it in. And just like that, I was inside his life. I expected to find Jessica. Their little love notes. Maybe some explicit photos. What I didn't expect was a folder labeled receipts. Curious, I clicked. And there it was. Transaction after transaction. Hotels. Fancy dinners. Expensive gifts. Not just for Jessica. For 3 other women. My stomach twisted, but not with heartbreak. That feeling had already died. This was fuel. I clicked through the email threads. They weren't just casual flings. He had full-blown relationships with them. There was Sarah, who thought he was a single entrepreneur and wanted him to meet her parents. There was Mia, who had just moved to Austin and was so grateful to Mark for helping her get settled. And then there was Rachel, who, according to the emails, was pregnant. Pregnant. My vision blurred for a second. Not because I cared about Mark, but because this was so much worse than I thought. Mark wasn't just a cheater. He was a liar. A manipulator. A con artist. And now? He was about to be exposed. I spent the next hour collecting everything. Screenshots, bank statements, messages. I compiled it into a neat little package. Then, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to ruin him. I was going to make sure he never recovered. At 10 p.m., I called Lisa. I need your help. Lisa didn't ask questions. She just said, where do I need to be? An hour later, we were parked outside Jessica's house. Because while Mark was off ruining lives, Jessica was just as guilty. She knew he was married. She didn't care. So now? She was going to know exactly who she had been sleeping with. Lisa handed me a USB. You sure about this? She asked. I nodded. Lisa had connections. Tech friends who could make sure this information spread fast. I wasn't just exposing Mark to Jessica. I was exposing him to everyone. His boss. His clients. His family. His women. Everyone. I walked up to Jessica's door, took a deep breath, and knocked. A few moments later, she answered, still in a silk robe, still looking smug. But that smile faded the second she saw me. What the hell do you want? She asked. I handed her the USB. Mark's been busy, I said, keeping my voice calm. Jessica frowned, but she took it. What is this? Everything. Then I turned and walked away. Let the fireworks begin. Jessica didn't call me that night. I knew she would watch the files. I knew she would go through every message, every bank statement, every hotel booking. I just had to wait. And sure enough, by morning, all hell broke loose. It started with a scream. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Jessica just threw Mark's clothes all over the front lawn. Get over here. This is gold. I was already awake, sipping coffee in my new apartment across town, calm as ever. By the time I pulled up to Jessica's house, half the neighborhood was watching. People in robes and slippers, holding coffee mugs, whispering behind their hands. And there was Mark, standing in the driveway in nothing but sweatpants and sneakers, screaming at Jessica while she hurled shirts, pants, and shoes into the street. You're insane, he shouted. You think I'm insane? Jessica shrieked. You have a pregnant girlfriend, you sick piece of sh*t. I smiled. Mark ran his hands through his hair, looking genuinely shaken. His confidence, his cocky little smirk, it was gone. Good. Jessica spotted me. Her face twisted in rage. You, she spat. Mark turned, eyes locking onto me. And just like that, I saw the realization hit him. He knew. I did this. He stormed toward me. You did this, he hissed. You think this is funny? I tilted my head. Not funny. Just overdue. He laughed, but it wasn't real. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was unraveling. You're pathetic, he said. What, you think this makes you the winner? You ruined our house, our life, for what? Some revenge fantasy? I just smiled. That pissed him off more than anything. You're still in love with me, he snapped. That's why you're doing all this. Jessica cut in, livid. Oh, please, Mark. She didn't do this because she loves you. She did it because she's the only one who figured out what a lying, cheating, manipulative little man you are. The crowd gasped. Mark whipped around to face her. You were fine being the other woman. You're not innocent. Jessica slapped him. Hard. You let me believe we had a future, she screamed. You were sleeping with me while playing house with her, and while having a whole other girlfriend on the side. You're disgusting. Mark's face went red with rage. But before he could defend himself, a new voice cut through the chaos. Mark? We all turned. And there she was. Rachel. His pregnant girlfriend. I had never seen a man go pale so fast. Rachel was standing on the sidewalk, clutching her stomach, her eyes wide with horror. You told me you were single, she whispered. Silence. Even the neighbors were holding their breath. Rachel looked at me. Then at Jessica. Then back at Mark. Her lips trembled. How many? Mark's mouth opened, but no sound came out. That was answer enough. Rachel burst into tears. You're a monster, she sobbed. You let me, God, I thought we were in love. I thought we were going to have a baby together. You told me you'd marry me. I watched as the weight of everything collapsed on him. Jessica furious. Rachel heartbroken. Me? Completely and utterly free. Mark tried to fix it. He tried to lie his way out. Baby, I was going to tell you, it wasn't like that, she's exaggerating, but Rachel wasn't listening. Neither was Jessica. And neither was anyone else. By the time Rachel got into her car and sped off, Mark was standing in the middle of his ruined life, surrounded by people who finally saw him for what he was. And for the first time ever, he had nothing to say. I walked up to him, stood inches away, and whispered, "You were right about one thing." His jaw clenched. I smiled. "I don't forgive you." Then I turned, walked to my car, and left without looking back. People always ask me if I regret what I did. If I regret selling the house. If I regret exposing him. If I regret leaving him with nothing. The answer? Not even a little. Mark thought I'd cry. He thought I'd beg. He thought I'd stay. Instead, I took everything. And I let him drown in his own mess. Revenge isn't always the answer. But sometimes, it's exactly what's deserved.